Hey, I was up really late making some changes to StateAdapt. These are pretty big changes. This is a change in philosophy, kind of. Um, Before, I wanted StateAdapt to enforce reactive programming. So, one of the things that I always saw was in like other libraries, just in applications in general, in Angular, is people wanted to make imperative state changes quite often, and even in NGRX, which is supposed to be really one-way data flow, they would make actions that are like looking downstream and making specific changes, and so you dispatch multiple actions at the same time to make each of those changes, and that's not reactive. That's basically imperative. So what I wanted to do with StateAdapt was prevent that by making the only way to make state changes have making it so that stores have to specify what they are reacting to, and making them observables, and just having in all the examples just that same pattern. You make sources and then you plug them into stores, and just always encourage naming your sources like events. But I am writing an article right now. Right now it's called Progressive Reactivity in Angular. And the main idea is what we really want is declarative code. Usually that's reactive, but it's not always reactive. Declarative code is code that is self-contained. So Svelte has declarative code for synchronous updates. You can declare a relationship between, so you can say B equals A, and every time A updates, B will automatically update. And for an Angular developer, for an ArcsJS familiar developer, it's we think of observables. You have like B $ equals this dot A $ dot pipe map. So every time A updates, B updates. So that's declarative. Everything that B is going to be is declared immediately, like in one place. It's also reactive because it's using ArcsJS. But you can have static content that's declarative as well. Like if it's just a hello world header, and that's all you have as your app, that is declarative. It's not reactive because it's not going to react to anything, but it's 100% declarative. So there aren't going to be bugs. So the thing we really want to avoid is the bugs from like imperative programming, where you have this callback function somewhere that's imperatively making changes to a bunch of things that are out of its context. That like the logic for how a feature behaves over time is spread across the app depending on when updates to it are going to happen. So that's the thing to avoid. So basically my understanding is this: you can have declarative code at any level of interactivity. As you start down at like the static level, there's no reactivity or imperative programming. Zero interactivity, but it's still 100% declarative. So you're going to have no out of context updates and just no like serious bugs. And then at the next level up, you're going to have very simple interactivity. And so you can either implement that in an imperative way or a reactive way. With vanilla.js and jQuery, that was imperative. With Angular and change detection and React and these things, React is kind of weird, but it's reactive. So as you get more and more asynchronous interactivity and sophistication and complexity, you can implement it in an imperative way or a reactive way. And as long as you do reactive, it stays declarative during the entire progression of increased complexity. So basically, you don't need RxJS to have reactive or declarative programming. In Angular, you don't need it for simple reactivity. Change detection does that. So, but there's one problem. There's one like little less than ideal fact that we have to accept in our in Angular, and that is that the beginning of every interaction is imperative. Like, you have a click handler. We define a subject as something that you push values to, but then in the template we are imperatively calling .next, so we're commanding it to push something else. If it was completely reactive, we would have the template at the top of a file, and then we'd refer to the button directly and say .click $. And so we aren't defining the source in our code, it's the template that defines the source. That would be 100% reactive. But we can't really do that because down in the end, the template also depends on stuff from there. So you get like a circular reference problem. So basically, the best you can get to ensure declarative programming is to make sure that every event in the DOM just makes one single imperative call to something. So it's actually okay if it updates the store directly, as long as it only updates one. The way I think about it is, I'm going to show this now, this demo. Here's the example in the StateAdapt repo, the counter example that shows how the data flow worked before and still can work, but doesn't have to work like this. So I'm noticing in this template, we're always calling an imperative thing at first, and this is referring to these sources that we create here. So, but this feels a little like useless indirection, because this goes to here, doesn't do anything, then goes to here. And there's only one state change that happens because of it, but we're making an imperative call in the template, so if there's only one thing that ends up needing to happen, then why don't we just directly call that? But this is nice because if you needed a second store, you want, and then one event needs to be able to change state in both places. What you want is something like this, where you have an independent source and then both stores are just reacting to that. So you just create this. That is great. But I thought, as for like, if we're already just calling one imperative thing, would it hurt to just get it from here instead of defining it independently? Like, if I'm thinking about like progressive reactive syntax, and that is using the simplest syntax while still having it as reactive as possible and declarative as possible. So at this level of complexity, the biggest, the highest amount of declarative code you can get doesn't need this. This is just as declarative as just calling something on the store directly. Because this isn't the event source. This is the event source. So this already is one tiny thing that isn't totally declarative, and this is not that different than just calling it on the store directly. So here's what I did. I updated a demo. I copied it. I copied a store twice. So you have two stores here, and you have one action that can still affect both. But if we're starting without it, say, and what we have is just two stores that each have the same adapter, the same increment adapter as before. This is the event source. It's in the template. It already has to imperatively call something. So it might as well just get it straight from here, because it has to get it from somewhere that isn't here. So it might as well be here. It's simpler syntax. So what I have is the adapter, the state changes. These just become available on the store object that gets created. So you can call these adapter state reactions directly. And then, so this is optional now. You don't have to provide sources. The way I think about it is that this init method, it automatically creates sources and bundles it into the store. So I don't think of it as causing the state change necessarily. I think of it as creating default sources that can be used if the event source doesn't need to be expressed independently. So it's just a convenience thing that bundles some, I call them synthetic sources, with the store, and these are like default sources. So how do you know when it's okay to use these, or when it's reactive or as declarative as possible to use them? Basically when you only need to make one state change, it's okay. And that actually is a fairly common pattern. So like in real world apps, it's not that common because you're making like server requests for every action pretty much. But for like adapting a feature that had just client state, and it was very, very simple UI state, and adapting it, like creating an adapter, like adapting it to an official like managed piece of state, this would be progressively a little more reactive, incrementally more reactive, and it would still be as declarative as it was before, because before we would have behavior subject .next or something like that. This is similar, but at least the state changes are like defined in a grouped, a bundled way, so that's declarative. So it's declarative to do it this way, and it's just a little more reactive. So then if you want the next level of interactivity or sophistication or complexity, you want to reset both. This now, you have two choices. If you want to reset both, you can make a method. Don't do this, but you can make a method that says reset both, and it does this .store.reset. By the way, this is a minor TypeScript issue. This you can't have both. Like this, like for stores to accept sources that emit void, I had to make this so that it accepts any, but now if you call it directly, you have to pass something because it's expecting any. It's weird. I tried it. There are two ways, and one works, the other way this is annoying. But this only happens when you define a state change that actually specifies the payload but doesn't use it. In other words, it's going to use the initial state, which is the third parameter, So basically, this reset state change is the only one you're going to see. But anyway, so this is one approach, and it's not reactive, it's imperative. This is what I wanted to avoid. This is why I created StateAdapt, because people were using NGXS, NGRX, and creating libraries where specifically this is like kind of encouraged. But this is where you get forgotten side effects, forgotten downstream, not side effects, forgotten downstream state changes that should have been synchronous and reactive, and so you get two actions that are fired back to back. The store computes two new states. It's inefficient, and it's imperative and bug prone. So do not do this. What you want to do, if you need one event to affect multiple stores, is you now that event is an independent thing. You need an independent representation that's not the default from any single store. You need like its own representation of this event source, so that can then be referenced by both of these stores, so they can react to it. All right, and yeah, so that's what I did here, and I'm going to show you the demo. Just it works, but reset both. See increment, or I need a refresh so you can see this brand new thing. So you're initting both the stores, increment, double. This is the count one store. Increment. Also, I'm generating these from the path that's passed in. So it's gonna be lowercase. Like these are the default sources. So I'm getting the names from this or from the adapter. So I'm just saying increment. I'm adding that after the path that you're passing in. So that's where that comes from. So double, and then you can reset one. That's count two reset, or reset both. It dispatches a single action that changes both stores. This is how Redux DevTools is most useful, when one event maps to one state change. So, all right, that's the big change with StateAdapt. The idea is be more flexible, but provide clear direction. And the clear direction is don't write callback functions. Because callback functions with void, they are containers for imperative code. So avoid them. All right, so there we go. There's one other change, and this is something that I inadvertently fixed. It now recognizes when you're trying to pass in define a state change source that doesn't exist for a state change that doesn't exist on this adapter. So that's great. Finally, I got that working, and I still have a bunch of videos coming out that are scheduled because I just converted a ton of projects like all at once, and I didn't want to just barrage people with like notifications for the like 20 people who are subscribed. I didn't want to just spam subscriptions, so I have scheduled those apart, and there's one coming out tomorrow, assuming I publish this today, Wednesday, and yeah, but they won't have this. I complain about it a couple times, and they definitely don't have this default source, this synthetic sources. They don't have those. So yeah, it'll be like quite a few videos before that change starts showing up in my conversion projects. Anyway, so that's the change. This will be in StateAdapt 0.46, and yeah, I'll release that soon. I need to test this more, but it looks good. So All right. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any ideas or feedback. And still, don't use this in production, but I feel like it's getting close. All right. Bye.